Right, ladies and gentlemen, MrSotko here. Welcome back to the channel, and today I have a new video update on yesterday's video, sort of in addition to Kleiman's lawyer seize on evidence of Craig Wright's fabrication. So 2 days ago, 145 addresses were signed that are part of the Bitcoin Tulip Trust list of addresses that Craig Wright submitted to the court. There were 75,300 and some odd addresses that supposedly equal up to 1.1 million Bitcoin that he all owns. I don't know how he owns 75,000 addresses, but the response is pretty interesting to this. Now, those 145 addresses were a part of the video I made yesterday that was talking about how all 145 were signed, and it says Craig Wright is a liar and a fraud, and then it goes on to talk about the Lightning Network and on-chain scaling, etc. Kleiman's estate's legal team has entered into evidence this week's revelation that 145 addresses claimed by Craig Wright are not controlled by him. They filed a notice of supplementary evidence supporting their motion for sanctions against Wright earlier this morning, added to the laundry list of complaints against the Satoshi claimant. Also, there was another address, it was a little while ago, that it was just a single address that was signed that was saying that Craig Wright was a fraud as well. So at least 146 plus of the addresses are absolutely just not in control of him. They said the new evidence further proves that CSW filed list is not a list of Wright's Bitcoin public addresses, but is instead a purposeful fabrication by him. The Kleiman estate is suing Wright over the Bitcoin he allegedly mined in a partnership with the late Dave Kleiman. So on May 24th, 2020, an unknown actor posted the message that signed the private keys, as in the video yesterday, calling him a liar and a fraud, talking about Lightning Network, adding a bunch of interesting things to it, but I suppose you can put whatever message you want. And the coins and the addresses were all mined between May 10th, 2009 and January 10th, 2010. With each holding the original block reward of 50 BTC, which is, rather interesting that none of those 145 of them have not been moved, adding up to $164 million worth combined, and not a single one of them moved the entire time, and somebody has the private keys to all of them, which is, again, even makes it even more interesting and mysterious. The plaintiffs quoted Bitcoin expert Andreas Antonopoulos' declaration that you cannot sign a message in this way unless you have the private keys to those addresses. So Bitcoin SV supporters believe the message was from early Bitcoin developer Greg Maxwell, who they claim has a vendetta against Wright. But either way, if it was Greg Maxwell or if it was Joe Schmo, it proves that 145 of the addresses excuse me, are absolutely not Craig Wright's. BSV's billionaire benefactor Calvin Ayre claimed the addresses are not on the official sealed and final list. Very questionable. He says he presented an early list that was all possible ones his could be that is public, and then even though they're all public because they're public keys, and then later when he was clear on his he filed this in court, but it's sealed, so not public. No of the blocks, I would suppose none of the blocks Maxwell and other fraudsters are using to attack Craig are on the valid sealed list. So that would essentially mean that they just took all addresses within those years. They could. I don't know if 75,000 would be all of them or not. Between 2009 and 10 in that area that supposedly Wright and Dave Kleiman were mining in. So 75,000 basically random addresses, and was like, these are all the possible ones. That's like going to your bank, you've been taken to court, and you go to your bank and you get every single person's bank statements, and you throw them down, and some of these might be mine. That's basically what happened. It's 75,000 totally random addresses, and anybody can look up on the blockchain if you just go back far enough. And then that's not the real list. So they submitted a list to the court that was just total nonsense. And then they submitted a secret list. In what? See, it just doesn't. I love the responses. I really can't get enough of them. It's like reality show entertainment at this point. It's all BS, but it's just a good time. However, as a plaintiff supplement makes clear, the CSW filed list was mistakenly filed by them on the public docket. Mistakenly. Totally. Given the unknown actor access to them, and the 145 addresses are indeed on it. Well, okay, again, mistaken, but why would you create a list of 75,000 plus addresses knowing that you know what your addresses are? You see what I mean there? You get what I'm saying? Like, if you know your addresses and you have a real list of your addresses, why did you generate 75,000 addresses if those aren't your addresses, or if those including your addresses are piled in there? Why would you even do that exactly? Why go through the time, and then why submit that? How can you mistakenly submit that? You know that the 75,900 page document that you submitted is not the real one. Because if you don't have 75,000 addresses, guess what? That 900 page PDF that you submitted, it's going to be way smaller, right? It just doesn't make sense. It's good stuff. It's real good times. The plaintiffs had already argued the list was a forgery intended to deceive plaintiffs in this court, and that Wright created it to avoid sanctions pursuant to this court's order. So the plaintiffs basically that it's a forgery, that Craig Wright is just throwing nonsense at them to just avoid court sanctions as long as he can. They said the new evidence further proves that this list, not an accurate listing of Wright's Bitcoin, and that he is still hiding the true list from the plaintiffs in the court. Or does he even have a list? I don't think he has a list. Why would 75,000 addresses is ridiculous. Said simply, Wright represented these 145 addresses were part of his Bitcoin holdings and were locked in an accessible encrypted file. This week, the person that actually controls the private keys to those addresses used those private keys, thus proving the addresses do not belong to Wright. While the new evidence was seized upon by many on crypto Twitter as demonstrating once and for all Wright is not Satoshi, that's not the position of the Kleiman team. They still believe he has access to considerable BTC wealth and demand a share of it based on Wright's alleged partnership with Dave Kleiman in mining the BTC. Last week, they argued that Wright has access to the BTC holdings in question. And if he does, which it's possible that Dave Kleiman and him, of course, mine together. Otherwise, why even go through all of this nonsense? Is it just total fabricated nonsense that Bitcoin doesn't even exist, and that he's just trying to get people to believe that he's Satoshi, or does it really exist and he's just throwing nonsense at the court? Which would make sense, because I think this is really one of the first times that Bitcoin have been used in court like this, in terms of like this mystery, and not just like a divorce or something, and like you have this Bitcoin and like you have to split half of it because it's an asset, et cetera, like not in that way. So with this said, I mean, you can do this as Craig Wright. Like, you can just provide nonsense addresses, and who is to say that these are yours or these are not yours? Now, of course, it's easy for us to all say, hey, 75,000 addresses are not your addresses. But then he would have to say, well, prove it, or disprove it, or whatever. And you really can. It's just public keys and with no name attached to them, mined so long ago. So you really can do this. It's really difficult to actually find out who has the Bitcoin, where is the Bitcoin, who actually mined the Bitcoin, who truly owns it. Was it ever mined? Of course it was mined, but was it mined by them, et cetera, et cetera? It just goes on, and you can really just drag a court on as long as you really wanted to, because the discovery is going to be very, very difficult. But there's a plot twist. Despite Antonopoulos' evidence, the person who signed the message had access to the private key. Decrypt today quoted Bitcoin developer Rene Picard as saying that it was still possible the addresses had been exploited. He says, of course, security might be compromised and the signatures could only be created for this particular message, but not for potential coin transfers. I actually really don't know what he means by that, essentially. But that's certainly a possibility too. I mean, it was 145 addresses, and you have to ask yourself who, aside from maybe Satoshi, if he's even still alive, or a group of people, has access to 145 addresses, all from 2009 to mid-2010, that still has every private key for every individual address, 145 individual private keys, which is great. Great organization, by the way. I got to give it to you if you do. But who does? Like, that's such a rare person in this world to have that many different addresses, all with 50 Bitcoin in them, all with the private keys to each one of them, is a very rare thing these days. So that's certainly a possibility that the public keys were somehow the addresses were somehow compromised in some way. But how, I really don't know. I think I'm going with Antonopoulos on this one. It's going to be hard to do that without the private keys, but I suppose a Bitcoin developer may know more than I. But it's certainly a possibility as well. But I just can't get enough of the Craig Wright drama. Just the ridiculous responses. Like, no, that was just a fake document we submitted to court. Basically, it's just like, yeah, we've submitted a fake document to court, and we're going to submit a real document later, or it's an actual sealed document, yet the other lawyers don't know about this. So, like, how can the court proceed? It just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. It's just like whatever. They're kind of like flat earthers at this point, like Calvin Ayre and Craig Wright. So, like, any kind of evidence you present at them, like, look, here's a picture of Earth, like it's a sphere, and they're like, nah, that's a doctored photo, and you're like, okay, and then like every single thing you throw at them, they just have like some kind of thing for it. Like, what about the sun? And they're like, oh, it's above us and it rotates, etc. So no matter what, they have an argument against it. It's amazing. It's such amazing BS. But I hope you guys enjoyed it, and as usual, I'll see you guys next time.